So as I've just said, Love and Soil, it started off as an idea where we bring people from different disciplines together, all who are passionate about the countryside. So whether that's farming or whether that's working with the land in terms of research or environmental projects, or just appreciating it through creativity and art form. It's about having people all having their voices represented and having a conversation. And now that we're going to do this digitally, it's great to be able to have you with us, Kate, because I know that you have a background or a foot in each camp for environmental and in agriculture. So it's great to have you as our first speaker in inverted commas today. So if you could tell me a little bit more about your background, please, Kate.
Yeah, so, well, you and I met through the Nuffield Farming Scholarship. So my background is in agriculture. I started life as an agronomist, and then just quietly edged into environmental sort of side of things, just because that's been a real passion for me since I was very young. And I suppose using my agricultural understanding, I was coming at it in a way that I knew farmers would understand, that I was dealing with issues that I could see farmers were dealing with. So it was kind of a pair of muddy boots on that I was approaching a lot of the sort of challenges that I was dealing with. So nowadays I'm a farm advisor in environmental specific areas, really. So I do a lot with waste permitting. I do a lot with habitat creation projects, sort of countryside stewardship type things. I work on river flood management and with watercourse management. And then more recently, I've become a facilitator of a farmers group, which covers the north of our county in Shropshire.
But what I'd like you to do as well, Kate, is just tell us a little bit more about your Nuffield Farming Scholarship, because obviously that's how I got to know about you and your work. And I was there listening to your presentation and really enjoyed hearing your story. So if you could give us a summary of your Nuffield Farming Scholarship, and we can talk about some of the themes that you picked up on in that.
Yeah, well, I mean, Nuffield presented me with this fantastic opportunity to look into something that I've always felt really passionate about. And I think it came out from the fact that sometimes farmers feel quite upset that people think that they've got that they don't care about the environment that we work in, that we have a sort of disregard for nature. And I know from the farmers that I work with regularly is that isn't the case. And so it kind of bore out from a lot of that. Plus also in my sort of day job, I was seeing these massive disconnects between what we understood on the ground to what the sort of science was telling us. And I kind of just wanted to work in that space and kind of see what we could do to sort of change things. So I had this opportunity, as we both did, to sort of travel the world and do some discovery in this area. And it was fantastic to get out there and meet people and talk to people on the ground from all perspectives, whether it's environmental NGOs or you know, the farmers on the ground, or the researchers, or the policymakers and the politicians. And you know, I suppose initially what was kind of heartbreaking was the amount of conflict that is out there in the world around stuff that we really just need to buckle down and put right. So, you know, moving on from that, it was really nice to then start finding some good news stories about how we don't need to argue and there is a route through this. And, you know, that was desperately what I was looking for, how we kind of overcome these issues that really are, I believe, stifling a lot of progress as far as sort of environmental targets are concerned.
Well, I'm going to do that thing that people always have to Nuffield scholars and ask them what was their take home, what was that one thing that they remember about their travels that you want to have in the UK and adopt?
I suppose it's interesting because I'd like to say it was in a field on a farm or it was in a beautiful forest or something, but it wasn't. It was sat around a desk at a university in Sweden, where in Uppsala, where we were talking about some research that these guys were doing into valuing the tacit and local knowledge of sort of indigenous people there. And at the time it felt really important to me and I wasn't sure why. And I was kind of asking a lot of questions because I just wanted to hear them talk about this, because inside it was telling me something really important. And what I came away from that with is that doesn't, I don't believe, just apply to people with, you know, semi-subsistence lifestyles or subsistence lifestyles. This matters to every single one of us about the place we live in, because it's about identity, I think. and it's about people knowing their part in the landscape that they farm in, that they live in. And, you know, we need to recognise that a lot more in whether it's a much more productive farming systems like we have in the UK, or right the way through to, you know, sub-Saharan Africa and you know, subsistence farmers there. We all have knowledge inside that we can bring that is really quite important. And sometimes it can help science, sometimes it might fly in the face of science, but it's been massively undervalued. And I think if we could start listening and sort of harvesting, as an agricultural term, that information, we could make a huge difference and we could really push some progress, I believe. So yeah, that was my slightly, you could tell I get overexcited about that, Barbara, sorry.
I love that passion, but the thing you're saying that listening is important. And I just wonder, when did we stop listening?
Yeah, do you know what? I don't know. I think agriculture was driven very hard after the Second World War, and I think that, you know, that it was a single agenda, and that was about producing more food. But you know, what we've got to achieve now is so complex and it's so multifaceted, and so to be able to do that, we need to draw on everybody's skills and knowledge, and you know, so perhaps science has always taken the precedent. You know, it's always been science that's the most important, and it is the fact. And you know, I go back to my original thoughts of Nuffield when I remember somebody talking about a farmer's opinion, or that they'd seen something and they said, well, it was only anecdotal because a farmer told me. And it was crushing because I felt like for some reason it was just an anecdote, and it didn't hold any fact. Whereas, you know, I could tell you that scientific papers I've read don't fit with what I understand from the ground. So you extrapolate that out to the farming community, and it goes on and on. So I can't tell you when we stop listening, but my goodness, it will make a massive difference when we start listening again, I think.
And when you're working with farmers now, do you talk about that still? Is that something you've brought into your work, and how do you facilitate that listening?
Yeah, you know, it's really interesting. So a lot of farmers have different opinions too, so there can be quite a lot of clashes in opinions and in approaches within the farming community, as well as with stakeholders beyond. It is difficult sometimes. You can't tell somebody how to think, I don't think, but you can quietly shift people. I suppose this is the sort of manipulative way I work, but I think you can sometimes influence people's thoughts, and by just gentle exposure sometimes to other people's approaches and other people's way of doing things. And you know, people will always do a better job if they come to that solution themselves and not be forced into it. And you know, you see a lot of this with regulation around water quality or something. People don't want to do it when they're being told, but if they want to do it and they see an impact on their stream that they love, then they'll do it, you know. And so it's those sorts of quiet, yes, possibly manipulative routes that I'd probably be taking, to be honest.
That's the weird thing. I mean, you said earlier that farmers within their own cohort, they're all very, very different opinions, different
Yes.
backgrounds, different ways of working. So the fact that we lump people together like that, it doesn't work from the outset, does it?
No, it doesn't. And we come across this quite a lot when we talk about regenerative agriculture, for example, or agroforestry, or, you know, the sort of new language that's talked about how farming can shift, which farmers don't recognise, by the way, at all. But you know, something like regenerative agriculture, when you break it down, it is lots of small measures, and lots of farmers are doing those little bits of measures, but they would never identify themselves as an agroforester or a regenerative farmer. So this is one of the things, these kind of myths I've been trying to dispel with some of the sort of environmental groups that I work with. That is, you know, a lot of this stuff is going on, and it's probably just tiny tweaks and changes. You don't need that farmer to identify him or herself as a regenerative farmer. What we just need to do is gently urge them to modify what it is that, you know, that is quite often nearly there already. And, you know, I look at South Shropshire, beautiful part of the world. The farmers down there would happily fit into a regenerative farming box, And yet when I was working down there in the summer, would one of them admit to it? No. Not at all, because they're not comfortable with the language, and you know it's owned by another group. So I do tend to kind of tease them a little bit with this sort of stuff, because it's always fun, but also to kind of get them to understand that it's not a bad thing, and actually going forward recognizing what you're doing right is going to be a really important thing for you to sell your public goods back to society. So yeah.
That's an interesting message, actually. And as you were saying that, I was just thinking about the creative process, because we'll be having artists contribute to this conversation as well. So people who are poets, musicians, writers. And where do you think they can add value in this conversation that weaves a narrative, I suppose, that can help lots of different groups?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, there's books out there that change people's lives and people's perceptions, and they can be so influential. So I think, you know, anybody who can get something down in beautiful language like I can't, that helps people sort of recognize what they're good at, and bring this sort of positivity to the sort of climate action changes, and you know, helping with the biodiversity crisis. It is so important. And you know, I don't know what the words would be, because that's not my bag, but my gosh, it could make a huge difference. It was interesting just recently that Prince Charles pointed out exactly the same issue as I do around this kind of separation of language thing. And, you know, I think it would be, I don't know how you get over it, because we're always looking for new terminology and people don't all move at the same pace, but it's really interesting to understand how we can break down those barriers of words and turn it into a language that we can all talk. So
I think we have a challenge there that we need to what I really like about the project that we've got is you have got people from lots of different disciplines, and I just love that, where you can absorb information and learn from others. Because our school system, I mean, I'm not going to go into a rant about the British schooling system, but it is very kind of, you go into the system at 4 and it's almost predetermined where you're going to pop out at like 24. It's very hard to change in the middle. It's only as an adult where it's almost like you have to restart again. So, for example, if I wanted to pick up music or something, I literally would be going back to where I would have been at age 4 and starting over. And I think we're very quick to categorize people and put them into specific rows, and it's not that we're not allowed to deviate, it just there are barriers in doing it. And as a child, I always loved languages, but I also like science. But from the school system, you had to pick. You couldn't specialize in both. So I ended up dropping subjects that I really enjoyed, that I then picked up as an adult, because by that time I'd got all my science qualifications. And I just think, why don't we let people weave their way through life and pick up the best of everything? But now I guess share it all in a group.
And it's so important to cross those barriers. You know, I often think this, it's the idea of I did an agriculture degree. I could have done a geography one. It would have taken me down 2 different paths, but what it should have done is collided in the middle and helped us all to solve these problems. But that's not how it's worked. And I think you're absolutely right, because what it then creates is these kind of silos of thinking that aren't then helping us get to where we need to go. So those are just exactly the sort of barriers that changing the schooling system could really help us with, I think.
Well, sadly, I have no influence in that. But when I do talk to young people, because I do a lot of talks at universities, and obviously with Oxford Farming Conference, we have a programme for young adults going into the sector. And I always talk about the networking and getting to know people and working with people who are outside your comfort zone, because that's where the learning happens. And that's where you can make the biggest difference. Because if everyone is all working together on the same thing with that same knowledge base, you don't come up with new ideas that easily, because you're all starting from the exact same point. So I really like what you're talking about bringing people through a different way and exposing them to different things, and hopefully changing some of the mindset as well.
And it's really exciting sometimes to meet somebody like an artist or a sculptor or a poet who, you know, I has skills that I would just love to have, but I don't. And to see their take on my farm or the countryside that I love and I live in, and what different people pick up on in a place that you perhaps take for granted and you walk past every day, or how they might approach a challenge that you think you fix this way, and they'd say, well, haven't you done this way? You know, it's those opportunities that mixing with people that you don't normally have an opportunity to mix with can present, I think.